And now we could use that to do things like developing Copilot. So let me show you a few things that we are currently doing in for our own business. Okay, and I'm going to start with an example that's kind of the low-hanging fruit for a lot of people. And what this is this is a product we have that is used to create documentation, whether that is documentation for a technical product like the one I'm about to show you here. For those of you who've ever used Code Framework, you're probably aware of this. This is the same thing that you find on docs.codeframework.io. And this tells you about how to develop, in this case, Windows apps or API-driven apps using this Code Framework, open source framework product that we support. And this is the documentation for it. But this documentation engine is used for a lot of things. It's used for knowledge bases that companies use for their institutional knowledge. It's used for other product documentation, employee manuals, whatever. It's just a documentation engine that pulls together information from all kinds of sources, whether that is markdown files, HTML documents, PDFs, but also live data. So one of the things this can do is it can go, for instance, into a Git repository and pull out work items, like a work item backlog, and present it as part of this documentation. And it's up to the second live data, right? It's just real-time data. And so the interesting question is, well, how do you start searching that and create interesting stuff? And so what we've done here is we've added a Copilot here, and I can go into this Copilot and start asking it questions. So I could say, okay, I'm a code framework developer. I want to build a Windows application, and I want to create a new view, in other words, a UI, that is automatically laid out, because that's one of the templating styling features that this supports. And I want to hook it up to data on the back end and do data validation at the same time. So I can say, can you provide a code sample showing how to use an edit form for automatic layout and bind the elements to properties on a view model with data validation. And I go ask, and it takes a moment, and the UI is horrible. Please ignore the UI here. I'm just showing you how the sausage is made, basically. So this will have a completely different UI by the time we actually put this out, and it's also currently very slow, and we do a lot of checking and then come up with the whole thing at once rather than the trickling effect that you would normally see. But that's not the point. The point is that this now went into the documentation base we had that is 100% ours, and this thing is also instructed to not answer any questions that are not code framework related, because that's what this particular knowledge base happens to be about. And so what we're doing is it asks this question. We then need to go into our knowledge base and find the appropriate document. So it created a search term for this. And again, the user wouldn't necessarily see this, but this is our internal version at the moment. So what we do is we use other AI. We figure out the intent of the user. How do we do that? We use an AI. We use a large language model. We call into OpenAI to figure out, what do they want to do? Oh, they want to search information about how to build an AI. Okay, what would be a good search term for it? That's a difficult task. How do you come up with a good search term that will give me back documents that are related to what the user wanted? Well, the simple answer is you ask a large language model. So the large language model came up with this search term here. We therefore could use something like Elasticsearch or Azure Cognitive Search or anything else you might have that allows you to search documents, which is a lot easier if it's AI driven. That's why I'm saying once you start with AI, everything becomes AI. But it's also conceivable to say, well, here is an API I have. It has the following input fields. Hey, large language model, what do you think a good way to call this API would be? And it would actually come up with useful information. But long story short, now that we know the intent, now that we know what documents might be relevant to answer this question, which is several different ones. We have documents in our documentation about how to bind data. We have other documents about how to write view models. We have documents about how to build user interfaces. And it inspected and comprehended all of those. And it then came up with an example specific to our framework as to how to build that. And that is much more likely to be correct, especially if I have it check on itself, than just answering, just using GitHub Copilot or just ChatGPT, because it is grounded using this pattern called retrieval augmented generation. It's grounded in the information that we specifically have in this knowledge base about this, and it's not in danger of accidentally putting in information that comes from a completely different framework or technology. So that's pretty cool when you think about what we just did there, comprehending what the user wants, finding other documents live, real time at this very moment, not pre-trained, adding that information to the large language model and then letting a large language model reason over this specific information only and coming up with a meaningful answer. Is this a question online is this a verbatim sample from your knowledge base, or is it synthesized from the various results that your search service returned? It is synthesized. It's on the fly coming up with new information that's not as such in the knowledge base, but that it can learn from the knowledge base we have. So you will not find a single document that had this example, but you could go through it and probably find 10 different documents that were related and did something similar, and then it came up with that answer and synthesized it, generated it right at that moment and gave a meaningful answer. So that's cool. Now you could do some of this stuff a little simpler. You could fine-tune models. If you have, say, an employee manual in PDF, you could just fine-tune the model and let it reason over that document. You upload it, it doesn't change. That's also a thing that people do a lot, where they write copilots that just go into this more semi-static information, and that's very useful as well. A lot of our customers are doing that. But this would be taking it a step further and on the fly doing this with real-time data. So that's pretty cool in itself.